Ephron once said, "I try to write parts for women that are as complicated and interesting as women actually are." In her short career as a writer, director, and actor, Lena Dunham has done some of that. Her work brings to life the confusion, quandaries, and excitement of being a young woman. Last year, she catapulted to success as the creator and star of the HBO program Girls. Here is a look.
Are we okay?
You and me?
Yeah.
Are you serious?
Yeah. Are we, like, less close now?
Of course we're not less close. I mean, you moved out, and so when two people don't live together anymore, they're obviously, like, a little less close, but we're no less close than that.
Maybe then we need to just try harder. Like, make plans for just the two of us, and...
Well, I'm always working, and it's like if I'm not at Grumpy's, then I'm writing, and it's just...
I tried calling you a lot last week.
And I told you now I have a third full-time job, which is taking care of Adam. I'm sorry.
I'm having a really time right now. I have no job, no boyfriend. It's starting to feel like I have no you, and that's...
That's not true, okay?
Yeah.
Marty, I'm right here.
Okay.
The second season of Girls begins this Sunday, January 13th. I am pleased to have Lena Dunham at this table for the first time. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
Very good to have you here.
Very exciting. I was looking around at the studio like, well, this is where the magic happens.
We hope. Yeah. You create magic, too, by the way.
Thank you so much.
How would you define what you do?
Well, I guess I would define what I do generally outside of Girls as I write and direct films and television shows that have strong female protagonists and are aimed at illuminating the human experience, but more specifically what it feels like to be a young woman in America right now.
And how does it feel to be a young woman in America right now?
Well, you know...
Depends on the young woman.
It depends on the young woman, and I think one of the things that's been a challenge, especially with the title Girls, has been people's sense that we're trying to speak for every woman, and obviously I'm very specific. I was raised in New York. I went to a liberal arts college. I am a Democrat. I am no longer a vegan, but I once was. I mean, there's a lot of... I think that I am as specific as any female is, and therefore I think one of the problems about entertainment for women up to this point has been people trying to speak universally to an audience that's just as complex as men are. And so... And
the audience, I mean, the women that you represent, in a sense, through your expression of character and story, are what, age 24, 5, 6?
They range, the characters on my show range from 21 to 33, but the four main girls, 3 of them are currently 24 and 1 is 21.
And do you think it's been such a surprise hit because, let's assume it's written good, it's acted well, and it's directed well, because there was a hunger for somebody somewhere in media? Tell my story.
I think that I did feel a feeling when there was this kind of amazing, almost electric sense when I was first making Girls that it was right when Bridesmaids was coming out, when The New Girl was coming out, and it felt like there was a more mass culture desire for entertainment aimed at women that wasn't just sort of, fantasy kitchens and sassy divorces. That was more than all of that. And so I really felt like Girls came along I think it was a really right place at the right time thing in that audiences were making their hunger for that sort of thing clearer. They were more fed up. I think female audiences, but also the only people who watch Girls are not females. Female audiences and audiences in general were making it clear that they wanted that entertainment for women wasn't just a fad. And I think networks and movie studios were hearing that in a totally other way. And obviously I work at HBO, which has always been, I would argue, not to sound like a cultist, a bit ahead of the curve, and obviously played Sex and the City, which was a huge, touchstone for women in entertainment. So
I want to talk a lot about this, but let me just see how you got here. So you grew up in New York. Your mother's a photographer. Your father's
a painter.
A painter?
Yep.
As an artist.
Yes, they're both artists. I always had to, when I said he was a painter, I always had to clarify because people assumed that he painted houses
yes,
and or chairs.
Yeah. And their influence on this series is profound because of their influence on you.
Yes, I would say that although I'm playing a character who has a lot of biographical details that differ from mine. She's from Michigan. She has a sort of contentious relationship with parents who don't understand her. I have been to Michigan once, and my parents understand me a little bit too much. But my parents' sort of firm belief that self-expression was sort of like the holy grail of life is something that was hard not to soak up.
Yeah. You also hung out with the adults.
A lot. I mean...
So did I.
Did you?
Oh, sure, yeah.
It's like,
I had to because my parents had a country store, which therefore the only people that inhabited the country store were adults.
You
and
have
the only
the
way
kind of
you
voice
could
that I
communicate with
imagine.
them. Yeah.
I was just saying, you have the kind of voice that I imagine belongs to someone who was raised in a very nice country store.
How is that?
It kind of has a lilt to it. There's like a slight Southern gentleman quality that you can't quite pinpoint. I'm rambling, but it's a sensation I have.
Yeah. So you grew up in that environment. Went out to Oberlin College?
I went to Oberlin. Oberlin was my ideal college. I didn't get in on my first try, so I went to the New School in New York for 1 year. Got my only 4.0 GPA of all time.
And then went back to Oberlin.
Then went to Oberlin and said, check it out, and then got there and promptly dropped my GPA by like more points than I would like to share here.
When did you decide that this is what I want to do? I want to act. I want to tell stories. I was always very enamored of acting, but didn't think it was a job I would be given, if that makes sense.
I think even as a young girl, I had a sense that I wasn't going to get cast as the ingenue. I wasn't also going to get cast as, the obese nanny. There were just not enough. It's funny, it sounds like insane to say this about school plays, but there just weren't necessarily parts for me. I remember preparing so hard for an audition for Alice in Wonderland and then being cast as a bouncing ball.
So once you had the time, though, to create things, did you immediately say there has to be a place for me? I'm going to create a place for me because I still want to act.
Well, it's funny. When I started writing films and I was making them on a very low budget, I thought, this character's based on me, so I'll just play her till I have access to someone really good.
A real actor.
A real actor who will come along and replace me. And it's funny because then when HBO came knocking, I definitely had access to a real actor, and suddenly I didn't want them. I mean, I have real actors around me, but suddenly I thought it was the first time I was forced to confront that acting was something I had more than a passing desire to do.
There was satisfaction, psychic income, and all that.
Exactly.
Yeah. And so what was the first thing you did? Short films.
I made short films. I made web shows. I made 2 different web series, which was sort of the first thing that made me think about writing in an episodic way. I made a very short feature called Creative Nonfiction, which went to South by Southwest in 2009, and then I met so many people.
This is a festival down in Austin.
Exactly, where that's been very supportive of me, and where my first 2 features and the first season of Girls all premiered.
Right.
So, and then I made this movie Tiny Furniture, and that was sort of the thing that broke everything open. It's creative nonfiction. It's funny because Tiny Furniture, I guess, would be considered like the breakthrough because it's what gave me the chance.
People paid attention.
People paid attention. It's what gave me the chance to
like
work.
Like Scott Rudin and people like that
exactly.
paid attention.
But when creative nonfiction was the one that gave me access to all these amazing collaborators and gave me a sense that there was actually a future for me in this. So in some ways, that's my kind of personal breakout, even though it's a 59-minute feature that no one will ever watch.
So are you surprised by the success?
Yes.
Are you really?
I mean, I think we all have fantasies that our work will be lauded in the way that we all secretly think it deserves to be.
Because you work on it believing in it.
Yeah, and you have to. And I don't think I guess there are people who are riddled with self-doubt, and I can occasionally be one of those people, but I think that you need to, at your core, it's so weird, making a movie, making any kind of art, really. It's like, it's being the captain of this crazy sinking ship where you're like, I can't believe all these people trust me. I don't even know how to move this steering wheel. I don't even know what you call the wheel on a boat. Is it a steering wheel?
What's a sail for?
Exactly. But you need to, at your core, believe that you're taking people somewhere good. And so you hope for this kind of reaction, but I think I'm practical. I'm not a window shopper. I've always kept my dreams pretty manageable. Yeah. My dad has this expression. He always says, "Love the possible," and it's usually used in response to my mom wanting to buy real estate that is far outside of our purview. And I've really taken it with me.
That's a great expression. Love the possible.
Love the possible.
Imagine the impossible and love the possible.
Exactly.
Right?
I think that's perfect. I like the Charlie Rose amendment to it.
I'll take it. So, we've got season 1 behind you.
Yeah.
Here's some of the things people ask about. How about writing males into this?
It's funny. I don't write males differently than I write females.
Meaning that it's the same thing. You write what you know about an individual.
I write what I know about an individual.
Character.
Maybe sometimes when the male characters feel a little more observed and a little less inhabited, just because I've spent so much time in my own female head, but I have not, you know, when I try to write a sympathetic scene of a man sort of ditching a girl that he doesn't necessarily want a relationship with, but I've only ever been the girl. So I do my best to make it feel expansive and generous.
What about the first year would you change?
You know, I'm not a big, like my Love the Possible philosophy, I'm not a big regrets person.
Right.
My mom is...
As somebody once said, you don't do do-overs.
Exactly. My mom is such a regrets person that she called her mid-career retrospective the music of regret, because she's just, it's constantly like, I ordered the wrong thing at dinner, I shouldn't have worn those boots, and I think she's dealt with it beautifully, but it's been a little sobering for me, so I've always tried to stay chipper about what has happened, maybe to my own detriment. But you know, the first season, I think most of the stuff that I'd change was not what appeared on the screen, because I think we needed all of it to understand what the rules of this world were. You know, there's a few storylines that work better than others. There's moments that didn't feel completely, those moments that felt a little broad or like comic in the wrong way, but we needed to try that to understand what, we need to touch all the walls and understand what the space had in store for us. You know, but I think it's really intense, I'm sure you know, to be thrust into a managerial position in what feels like slightly before my time. So I think
you can be assured it's before your time.
So my main regrets have to do with just thinking that I could have handled things differently. I can be both sensitive and bullheaded, and it's an odd combination. And so I'm learning more and more to work with a team, especially because I come from, you know, a house where two artists worked alone in their studios, and also I come from independent film where the biggest crew I ever worked with was 7 people, so that was definitely a learning curve.
Let me talk about the characters.
Yeah.
Hannah is you, of course. Describe Hannah.
Hannah is, I would say, the sweetest
Pretty good
words.
coffee, isn't it?
Yeah, loving it. The sweetest words that I could use to describe Hannah would be sort of hapless, anxiety-ridden, funny.
Doesn't sound like you, though. Hapless, anxiety-ridden?
You know, it's funny because Hannah is some of the most... It's weird because she's a mix of the most anxious, self-conscious, unproductive parts of myself and the parts that feel the most free to express themselves and that feel that they have the right to do whatever they want. It's funny because I both find Hannah... I mean, she can be painful to play because I always say if she has 2 choices in front of her, the right one and the wrong one, and one is labeled right one and one is labeled wrong one, she'll think about it for a really long time, then choose the wrong one. And so that can be a challenge to play sympathetically. But I also learn from her. She's so, she cannot tell a lie. She cannot betray herself. She, you know, has a genuine desire to make people around her feel good.
You said, I think maybe this was about Hannah, you said in writing that if I feel there is something shameful about something or myself, I want to expose it. I want to get it out there and rip off and make it transparent.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what's always comforted me. That's what I've always responded to in film and TV. That's what I've always...
It's authenticity and real.
Yeah, authenticity, and also just a sensation that the work is making us all feel a little less alone in our own heads.
And Marnie?
Marnie is, it's funny because she's superficially the easiest to describe. She's type A, she's beautiful, she's productive, she's seductive, but...
Is she all that you'd want to be?
I think that she is, if you were to see all the adjectives about her written down on paper, you go, yeah, I choose that one.
Yes,
but
right.
she's the most tortured because she doesn't leave any room for improvisation. So, you know, if one aspect of her day is off, she's utterly thrown by it. She's not prepared to have any kinds of confusing emotion. So, like, when
Okay, because she's so good. I mean, she's got all these assets that work for her, all those things you just said, that there's no room, in a sense, to be different.
Yeah.
Because she's never had to be different.
Yeah.
She never had to rely on her own wits or skills or the ability to change.
No, and she has...
Because it wasn't necessary.
Yeah, and I think that a little bit, I mean, Allison Williams plays her in such a complex way, but she has a little bit of what I call sort of pretty girl syndrome, where her life has been sort of, like, laid out for her, and so she has no problem-solving skills, but they're hyper-specific.
Right.
But more than Allison, Allison is, like, you know, shockingly, I mean, when you meet her, she's so hardworking, she's so well-adjusted, she's just a walking delight. But it's interesting because Allison has had this. When I first cast her, I sort of said, I've told her this before. I was like, do I really? I mean, she'd just gotten out of Yale. She's gorgeous and wants to be an actress. And I cast her, a month out of college. And I said to her, at first I was resistant to being one of the contributors to the Allison Williams success story. I was like, I can't help it. In high school, yes. I would have hated you for reasons that you can't control. And now she's one of my favorite people on earth.
Then there is Shoshana.
Yes, Shoshana, who's played by Zasha Mamet, who was initially not supposed to be a recurring
Wasp and two Jews,
character.
Is that correct?
Yes, 2 Wasp and 2 Jews. Well, I'm a half Jew on the show.
That's right.
I'm a half Jew in life, so I decided I would represent the bi-religious.
One and a half.
Yes, exactly. But Shoshana's full Jew. Shoshana Shapiro. And she was initially supposed to be this sort of character who bopped in, illuminated the difference between our New York and the Sex and the City of New York, then, ran off to go drink another Cosmo. So she was not supposed to be a recurring character, but Zasha played her so beautifully that she became one, and she's a little younger than the other girls, a little more innocent, a little more outwardly ambitious, and she's really fun to write. She talks very fast.
What do you not have that you want?
Great question. I feel so lucky in this way that's almost stupid because I think about it all day. Every day is like kind of Thanksgiving for me, but I feel like I'm still working on the balance of the whole thing. A lot's happened quickly, and so I don't want to be the person who sort of disappears underground for months on end and their friends think like, okay, well, we shouldn't invite her to the dinner party.
Right. Or she's too, and then they'll start saying you've changed, even though you haven't changed. They have changed in their reaction to you.
Yeah, and it's
this happens.
Yeah, and it's a challenge. And so I think for me, the thing I'm always striving, and I'm burning the candle at both ends, and then I get lots of colds, and so I really. Yes.
That's what happens when you burn the candle at both ends.
Yeah, I wish that I could say, like, I burn the candle at both ends and I have, drug-induced anorexia, but alas, it's just a stuff.
And then you go out on the town.
Exactly, but alas, it's a stuffy nose. But I just feel like I could stand to have a little more of an understanding of where work stops and life begins and how much I need of each. And I think that's one of those frustrating things.
How do you work on that?
I think it's learned with time, and things that you learn with time are so annoying.
Patience is not a virtue.
No, I want to learn everything now.
I do too, yes.
Yeah.
And so then these 4 characters, it's going to change in what way in year 2?
Well, in year 2, I think first year, just on a basic level about writing TV, the first year you have to establish all the rules and understand who these characters are and really give people... I mean, you have 10 episodes on HBO to show people who they are and what their own personal value systems are. And then once you've made that super clear, you can deviate. And that's so fun because the most fun thing to do in the world is show people acting counter to their own interests and counter to their own beliefs. Or acting sort of delusionally in the name of those beliefs. And so season 2, we just get to create all new kinds of drama.
You have said also that a lot of this is informed by isolation that you had.
Yeah, I mean...
Yet you grew up in a family that took you with them, and so you had exposure at art galleries and all the openings and all that they were part of.
Yeah.
You were in the adult world, but there was isolation, a feeling of aloneness.
I think the hard thing was that I was so frustrated. I loved my parents so much. I loved spending time with them, but there was this feeling where I was like, you guys can do all these adult things, and every day I have to go off to school with all these kids that I don't understand, and they don't understand me, and I don't feel connected, and I don't feel like I'm in my body or in my life here. And so... It's funny, when I look back on school, college was different, but when I look back on, like, age kindergarten through 12th grade, despite some great teachers and some great educational moments, it's like, I can't believe I spent that many hours in school considering how alone and peculiar it made me feel.
You went through that.
Yeah, and so...
But were you ever insecure, or were you always confident?
I think
analytical?
I think that I was confident... but that I was also defensive because that's the child reaction. And so I think sometimes I look back and I think it was just as much my fault that I didn't have friends when I was little as anyone else's, because I was sort of keeping myself in this strange bubble where I would, sit alone in class and read the Audrey Hepburn biography inside of my math notebook. And I didn't really particularly feel close to my teachers because I wasn't really interested in what they were talking about. Like, it feels like...
What were you interested in?
I was interested in reading. Storytelling. I liked to read. I liked to write. I liked to play games. I liked animals. I liked anything that allowed me to sort of play or role. I liked animals because I liked sort of like being the boss of a bunch of creatures and telling them what to do. I liked reading because it took me to new places. I was really into historical fiction. I went through a big writing historical fiction phase, but I didn't have the fact-checking
Yes, go ahead.
know-how.
So you have this sensational year, and you get to know people who call you up and want to have lunch, like the late Nora Ephron.
Yeah,
What do they say? They say, you've done something remarkable, and I just want to...
That's sort of the gist of it. I mean, Nora did this thing, which I now know is sort of vintage Nora, of writing me an email saying, I loved your movie. I just wanted you to know that. Let's have lunch sometime. And
a collector of people.
And she was just, you know, I've talked to so many young women who were championed by her. And the thing that is so impressive to me is when people do things they don't have to. Do you know, it's like Nora was at a place where she could have gotten away with reading Flaubert and hanging out with her husband and eating ravioli for the rest of her life. But
yes,
she
indeed.
had this incredible desire to keep learning and amassing knowledge and friends.
And what did this relationship do for you, other than give you a sense of pride and inspiration?
I mean, I think having a role model of somebody who's had, I mean, Nora was a mother, Nora was a writer, Nora was a filmmaker, she was a critic of culture, she was politically vocal. Seeing how someone sustains that over a lifetime.
A ferocious friend, too.
Yeah, is one of the most, I know that you know, and that she's very fond of you, and it's one of the most wonderful things one of the most generous things someone can give you is just to live well in front of you.
How much jealousy is there about your success?
It's funny. I'm bad at telling when people are drunk, and I'm kind of bad at telling when people are jealous. And I feel as though people have been really kind, but you definitely feel the shift. It's almost like, you know, I never want to complain because I have the luckiest job in the world, but there is a complicated social thing that happens, which is like, you know, people stop. At first, there's just a wealth of congratulations and a wealth of I'm so proud of yous. And then sort of, you know, like the morning of the Golden Globes, it was not like I was getting a million texts because I think people were like, okay, well, this is what Lena's life is like now. Good things happen to her. And I'm sure she's, you know, off celebrating somewhere on Angelina Jolie's yacht.
Exactly.
And so it's just a funny feeling.
Exactly. Sunning with Leonardo DiCaprio.
Exactly.
Right.
And that was not the reality. I was like cowering in a bed in a hotel, like being pretty convinced I was allergic to the wallpaper. So
how many people do you run into who you know feel there, but for one stroke of luck could be me? I could have been her. I know everything she knows. I have every skill she has, but she had a break.
Well, it's so funny because I feel like that has been sort of the crux of most of the distaste that people have had for me. And maybe that's, you never want to project. It's not very elegant to sort of try to project, to try to understand why anyone dislikes you. It's their right.
You feel it?
But yeah, I mean, there was too much sort of negative attention surrounding the positive attention for me to totally ignore it.
What was the negative? Characterize the negative.
I think that there's a mix of, I think that the show there was a lot of hype before it came out, and I understand as a, you know, someone I used to have that feeling like if everyone likes a band, then I don't want to like it. I'm over that now, but it was definitely,
If a club likes me, I don't want to belong.
Exactly. And so I think that there was a little bit of the sort of feeling that the show was overhyped in its birth. I think people
it's not that good, folks.
Exactly. And I think people had, you know, strong reactions to the character, feeling that the characters were unlikable, to the sort of socioeconomic breakdown of the show. And it's funny because, you know, I understand it all. There's no criticism that I would go, you're out of your mind. I just want to keep making it. So I'm so glad. The thing I think is the most amazing about the internet age is that we can all find what we want to see.
Yeah, exactly.
And if you can't find it, you can make it. And so...
Yeah, exactly. That's the more important thing.
Yeah. So I've never had...
Everybody has the capacity to do what I do here.
Yeah.
You know, maybe only one person will watch it, but they have the capacity to do it.
Exactly. And so I think I think there was a sensation that people had that was like, you know, any of us could have written this show about our four friends hanging around, and if we'd had the proper, publicity and advertising support.
Or Lena knows something we don't know.
Yeah, it's funny.
Yeah.
I once...
Not talent, but something else.
My mom told me this funny story where there was a woman who was my mom's a photographer, and another woman was a photographer, and my mom takes photos of sort of little dolls and setups, and she's had, the art world is a small world, but within it she's had a great career and been able to support herself, and she... one time a woman she overheard that a woman who she vaguely knew had said, I could have been Laurie Simmons if I hadn't had children. And my mom was like, well, I am Laurie Simmons and I did have children. So
yes,
there's always a sense the world has effed with you in some, unexplainable way.
Are you an exhibitionist?
I don't think about myself that way, but if someone were to argue it based on seeing the show and seeing that I am naked,
right.
more regular than a lot of women are on television, a lot of women who have more traditionally sexy bodies.
But do you do it because it's character, or because you kind of like it? It's kind of naughty, or you kind of like it?
I'm sure it's a combination. I mean, I think that it's character-based. I think it's about wanting to depict sex and bodies in a way that that's extremely realistic and unabashed and healthy. Mm. But I also think that if I didn't, I would never, I have too low a threshold for discomfort to write in something I hate doing all the time.
Right.
And
so you do it because it fits and you enjoy it.
I do it because it fits and I enjoy it. And you know what I like is there's something which a lot of people won't understand because not that many people get naked on TV, but there is something vaguely satisfying. And I hate to admit it, but I will because you have very penetrating eyes. But I hate, and so I have to tell you everything I feel. But I feel like there is some satisfaction to watching people sort of squirm and think that sort of you can't do that on television feeling is definitely is a little bit of a high.
So it's a turn on to know that they are saying, you can't be doing this.
Yes, I have an authority problem.
Now, is it any chance that Hannah will, this year in this season, say, I want to be a vegan, and I want to go to the gym every day, and I want to be like a Victoria's Secret model?
No.
Hannah would not do that.
She wouldn't do that, and I wouldn't do that.
Because she is as confident in herself as she needs to be.
She is, and I also think she recognizes, I mean, there's a line in the first season where her boyfriend says, have you ever tried to lose weight? And she says, no, because I've decided to have other concerns. And it's not that being healthy can't coexist with being creative. It's not like you need to sit around eating 9 Pizza Hut pizzas to like...
Right. Or you don't have to be unhappy to be creative either.
Yeah, but Judd Apatow...
You're not unhappy, are you?
No, I think I'm really happy.
Exactly.
I think I'm really happy. I mean, I can be anxious, but I really...
Right. Anxious about whether you wear some... Yeah, I know.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. Just the everyday anxieties, I feel them deeply. But Judd Apatow has a funny line he quoted. I think a friend of his said this, where he said... if you're working out, you can't work on your jokes. So it's like his I didn't phrase it perfectly, but that's his rebuttal to buff comedians.
What influence has he had? Because he gives you notes and other things.
Huge influence. I mean, Judd is one of the most, I mean, anyone who works with him will say this. He's so generous and so tireless and so skilled and also so good at, I think so many talented people have trouble letting someone else express themselves without major interference. And Judd, Judd gives notes, but he doesn't try to mold anyone into his own voice. He's really, really clear and wonderful about the fact that he's there to support. But also, when he has a note, I listen.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. It's such an honor.
My pleasure. Thank
you.
Lena Dunham, Girls starts January 13th. That's Sunday on HBO. Back in a moment. Stay with us.